Hey there, everyone. What kind of person walks away from $100 million? Apparently one with serious principles and a sharp ear for tone, because that's exactly what happened when Russell Crowe turned down the role of Aragorn in Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy. That's exactly what happened here. So let's unpack this crazy tale of almost could-have-beens. Studio politics and the value of staying true to yourself, even when $100 million is on the line. Yeah, the same role that eventually made Viggo Mortensen a global icon and could have netted Crowe around $100 million thanks to a 10% cut of the back-end grosses. Why? Well, because he knew that money isn't everything. In fact, it can often lead to more problems than it solves. When you attach a massive paycheck to a role, expectations go through the roof. Studio executives, producers, and even directors often have high hopes for a big-name actor to draw in crowds. But what if the actor doesn't deliver the goods? Or worse, what if the movie flops? He turned down a $100 million role based on a phone call. No meetings, no negotiations, no drawn-out discussions. He just hung up the phone and moved on with his life. Oh, now that's what I call confidence. Mortensen's portrayal of the stoic yet noble ranger was a standout performance in the series and earned him a place in pop culture history. If Crowe had taken on the role, it is unlikely that Mortensen would have been considered, and The Lord of the Rings might have been a very different experience for audiences. Suddenly, that big payday becomes a millstone around the actor's neck. That's right. Sometimes the best decision you can make is to walk away from something that doesn't feel right. Life is too short to waste on projects that don't inspire you or excite you. And that's exactly what Crowe did. Well, for starters, there's the obvious difference in creative vision. Instead, he trusted his gut and walked away. And who knows what would have happened if he had taken on the role. You never know when they might show up. If something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts and move on. Don't waste time trying to force yourself into a situation that isn't right for you. Whether it's a role in a big blockbuster or a job that pays the bills, sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and pursue something that excites you. Maybe he would have delivered a fantastic performance that would have earned him an Oscar nomination. Or maybe he would have been a complete disaster and derailed his career. We'll never know. Now that takes guts, determination, and a whole lot of confidence. But the bottom line is that it worked. Jackson had a very specific idea of what Aragorn should be like, and he didn't see Crowe fitting the bill. A director has a vision for their film, and they need to be able to execute that vision without interference. Crowe may not have been a fan of Jackson's filmmaking style, but he still recognized his talent and the potential of The Lord of the Rings. By passing on the role, Crowe allowed Jackson to work with an actor who was a better fit for the role and ultimately helped to ensure the success of the film. When an actor takes on a role that they're not right for, it can disrupt the creative process and ultimately damage the film. Crowe understood this, and he respected Jackson's creative process enough to step aside. On the other hand, Crowe wasn't willing to compromise his own artistic integrity to play a role that didn't feel right. He knew that forcing himself into a role that wasn't meant for him would ultimately lead to failure, and he was right. They're labeled a box office poison, and their career prospects take a nosedive. He sensed that director Peter Jackson, despite being a fellow New Zealander, had no real interest in casting him, and was being pushed by Warner Brothers to make the offer. Only would he have to live up to the fans' expectations of Aragorn, but he'd also have to deal with the studio's expectations of a big star. And let's face it, Crowe is not known for playing characters like Aragorn. He's not a typical leading man, and that's part of what makes him such a fantastic actor. But trying to mold yourself into a character that doesn't fit your natural talents is a recipe for disaster. Just ask Nicolas Cage, who infamously took on the role of Superman's father in Superman Returns after the highly anticipated return of the superhero to the big screen. Despite his best efforts, Cage could unshake his reputation as a quirky character actor, and audiences struggled to accept him as the Man of Steel's father. The film was a critical and commercial disappointment, and Cage's career took another hit. According to Crowe, the tone of Jackson's voice during their phone call gave it away. Crowe was smart to recognize this, and avoid the potential pitfalls of taking on a role that could have damaged his career. But it wasn't just about protecting his career. Crowe also had a good read on the creative side of things. "I don't think he even knows what I've done," Crowe said, implying that Jackson's enthusiasm for the project seemed forced and insincere. It's also about the working relationship between the two. If a director doesn't have faith in an actor's ability to bring the character to life, the result can be disastrous. Crowe sensed that Peter Jackson didn't really want him for the role. Rather than force his way into a franchise being shaped by someone else's creative vision, Crowe opted out, voluntarily leaving behind 9 figures. But why would anyone in their right mind pass on that kind of payday? Well, as it turns out, Crowe wasn't just holding out for a bigger paycheck. He had a good read on the situation and knew that accepting the role would be a bad career move. Before we dive into the juicy details, let me just say that this story is not about hating on The Lord of the Rings. It's a fantasy epic that's loved by millions and has left an indelible mark on pop culture. No, this story is about recognizing the importance of fit, both in terms of the character and the creative environment. Imagine being offered the role of a lifetime and turning it down, because it just doesn't feel right. In a revealing interview with Howard Stern, Crowe explained that the offer didn't feel genuine. Now that's a tough pill to swallow for most people, but Crowe's reasoning goes beyond just not liking Jackson. He saw the writing on the wall and knew that accepting the role would be a mistake. First off, let's talk about the obvious elephant in the room, the money. Turning down a 10% cut of a movie's gross is like rejecting a piece of the sky. The Lord of the Rings went on to gross over $2.9 billion worldwide. So a 10% cut would have put Crowe at around $100 million. That's no small potatoes. But Crowe didn't flinch. He passed on that massive payday without a whimper. Crowe understood this all too well. He knew that stepping into a big franchise like The Lord of the Rings would come with sky-high expectations. That kind of career risk is hard to justify, especially when there are plenty of other roles out there that better suit an actor's talents. When a director offers a role to an actor, it's not just about the script and the character. Now, before we move on, let's take a moment to appreciate the genius of Mr. Crowe here. So what did Crowe see in Jackson that made him pass on the role? Viggo Mortensen, who eventually landed the role, brought a certain charm and charisma to Aragorn that made him perfect for the part. But it's not just about creative differences. It's also about respecting the creative process. And let's be honest, this is coming from a guy who infamously had a fistfight with a director on the set of The Gladiator. But perhaps the greatest reason of all why Crowe passed on The Lord of the Rings is the most simple. He didn't want to be a part of it. He didn't let the promise of $100 million cloud his judgment or force him into a role that was unright for him. Crowe went on to have a successful career without ever appearing in The Lord of the Rings. The takeaway here is that sometimes walking away is the best option, even if it means leaving money on the table. And hey, maybe you'll end up making $100 million in the process. Thanks for watching. Till next time, stay curious and keep an eye out for those $100 million opportunities that are disguised as misconnections.